Hi everyone, it's Jeannie Byrne Michelucci, and I'm going to be talking about the trans-theoretical model and stages of change. And I'll be presenting a journal article that uses this model. And the reason I chose the article that I did is that I volunteer in a Title I inner city school, and I see and work with some kids that are overweight and have low levels of physical activity. And I also chose this study because it builds upon the study that Roe did last week. Here's some background information on the trans-theoretical model and stages of change, which are actually a construct within the trans-theoretical model. It was developed in the late 1970s by Prochaska and DiClemente. And it's interesting to note that Prochaska is one of the authors of Chapter 7 in our book. Prochaska and DiClemente studied and integrated 25 theories of psychotherapy. And they noticed that these theories ask why people change their behaviors, and not how they came about those changes. The authors of the trans-theoretical model identified 10 processes of change that they use to describe main ways in which people change their behaviors. And these are activities used to progress through the stages of change. And these processes of change can be covert, or not easily noticed, or overt and obvious. The developers of TTM studied smokers and former smokers, and they posed the question, why do some people stop smoking on their own, and some need professional intervention? They noticed that the participants of the smoking study used different change processes at different stages. The core constructs of the TTM show that people progress through 6 stages of change, and the stages are not linear, but can be cyclical. The 6 stages of change in the trans-theoretical model include pre-contemplation, where the person has no intent to change in the next 6 months, contemplation, where they intend to act in the next 6 months, preparation, where they intend to act in the next 30 days and have taken steps in this direction, action, where they have changed their behavior, but it was for less than 6 months, maintenance, where they have changed their behavior for longer than 6 months, and termination, where the person is 100% confident that they won't have any temptation to return to their old behaviors. The article that I'm going to be presenting to you today is Effect of School-Based Wellness Intervention in 7th graders on Stage of Change for Lifestyle Behaviors, the MATCH program. The authors are pediatricians and scientists who work at East Carolina University in the Department of Pediatrics and Public Health. You can access their article by this web address. The purpose of this research article is that childhood obesity is a major health problem in the U.S., and particularly in the region of the study. And obesity rates in children can be as high as 17%. The authors feel like in order to combat childhood obesity, both dietary intake and physical activity need to be modified. The researchers feel that schools are an effective place for behavioral interventions, because they can reach large numbers of students. The authors also feel like not many studies have been done on middle and high school age students. They want to study them and their health behaviors in more depth. The objective of this research paper is to determine the validity of the stages of change survey question in assessing readiness to change dietary and physical activity behaviors using the match intervention. The authors pose 3 questions. Number 1, is using a single item stages of change survey question valid? Number 2, is participation in the match program associated with a change in the stages of change? And number 3, is there an association with baseline stages and moving to another stage and a change in a student's BMI? The intervention in this study uses the MATCH program, and MATCH stands for Motivating Adolescents with Technology to Choose Health. It was developed by Tim Hardison, who was a philosophy wellness researcher who became a middle school teacher in North Carolina. And he used his background in education to build this program. And it's been around for over 12 years, and it's shown much success in helping kids make health behavior changes. It's an internet-based program, and it was designed to improve nutrition and physical activity habits in 7th graders. Self-efficacy is very important in the MATCH program, and it's taught through learning behavior modification strategies like self-monitoring and goal setting. The program also gives lessons on physical activity and nutrition and uses technology to reward students' progress with small incentives like water bottles or pens. Each school identifies a school coordinator, and they're trained at a 1-day workshop. Other teachers are trained inside the school. There are about 15 or more lessons that are taught over a 5 to 6 month time span, mainly in health and science classes. The method of this research was that participants were identified in 17 middle schools in North and South Carolina. The sample size was determined by the number of students in the 7th grade at each of these schools. But only the students with parental consent and student agreement were used in the study, so that ended up being 908 youths. They all had to have had participated in the MATCH program. A pre- and post-MATCH program self-reported survey was used. The researchers asked only one question to classify the stages of change. We will see that question in the next slide. They also asked about the students' frequency of fruit and vegetable intake and their frequency of physical activity. The students' BMI was measured as well. The survey question that the researchers asked to categorize the students for the stages of change is, which statement best describes your intentions regarding your health? If students answered, I have no interest in starting to become more physically active or eating healthier in the next 6 months, they were put in the pre-contemplation stage. Students that answered, I am thinking about starting to become more physically active and eating healthier within the next 6 months, were put in the contemplation stage. Students that said, I'm planning to start becoming more physically active and eating healthier in the next 30 days, were put in the preparation stage. If they said, I have been more physically active and eating healthier in the past few months, but less than 6 months, they were put in the action stage. And if the students answered that they have been more physically active and eating healthier for more than 6 months now, they were put in the maintenance stage. The results of the study were kind of mixed. The study found that physical activity and fruit and vegetable intake were higher in students who were classified in the action stage. It also found that stages of change categories improved after participation in the match program. The students in the action stage increased from 47% to 53% in the post-match survey. There was, however, only a weak association with changes in physical activity when a student moved to a higher stage of change. Also, there was no association between fruit and vegetable consumption and changes in the stages of change score. So, when a 7th grader decided that they will start becoming more physically active and eating healthier in the next 30 days, they may have moved to the preparation stage. However, the study found that change of stage does not necessarily mean that the student will consume more fruits and vegetables. Finally, BMI scores did improve significantly, but there was no association to a student's increase from one stage to another. But the authors are encouraged that an improvement in stages of change is possibly a factor in the long-term improvement of BMI scores in match participants. The discussion questions that the authors posed earlier have been answered by this study. The first one is, using a single item stages of change survey question valid? The researchers found that yes, it was found to have captured the appropriate stage of change in this population. Number 2, is participation in the match program associated with a change in the stages of change? They found yes, participants showed an increase from pre- and post-match surveys. And number 3, are changes in the stages of change associated with changes in BMI? No, but there was an association between baseline stages of change and a change in the BMI. In conclusion, the researchers found that school setting is a good opportunity to implement wellness interventions, and that these school-based interventions, based on the trans-theoretical model, are effective in the adolescent age group. Finally, participation in the match program may improve the stages of change for health behaviors and could contribute to improved BMI of students. There are several limitations to this study. The first one is that the match program was implemented in rural areas of North and South Carolina that have a population that's largely composed of Caucasian and African American students. Therefore, the results may not apply to a more generalized and diverse population. Secondly, the authors did not use a control group of participants, so they cannot definitively conclude that the match program is solely responsible for improvements in a student's stages of change. And finally, because the questions in the survey were taken from a cross-section of the population, these questions were not designed to discover individual behavior changes. The trans-theoretical model can provide a framework for identifying and measuring behavioral changes, and it has many applications in health education. For example, smoking cessation, alcohol and drug abuse, eating disorders, lack of physical activity, HIV prevention, and so on. The stages of change can help identify readiness for change, and the processes of change can be used to progress through the stages of change. So, for example, if I wanted to create an intervention for obese older adults, I would use the stages of change to identify which state the participant was in, and then I could use the processes of change to help them progress to the action stage for the intervention to be successful. The two talking points that I would like you all to address are that the trans-theoretical model is said to not apply well to children and adolescents. Why do you think the authors chose this model for this study? And since self-efficacy is an important construct in the trans-theoretical model, do you think schools can help develop self-efficacy in adolescents? Thank you for listening to my presentation, and I send you good thoughts and best wishes on your presentations.